Fear Street Part 2, 1978 comes out on Netflix tomorrow. This is the first screener I've ever received, so I'm very thankful for that. And it's kind of a special movie in that way. But in Shadyside, 1978, school's out for the summer and the activities at Camp Nightwing are about to begin. But when another Shadysider is possessed with the urge to kill, the fun in the sun becomes a gruesome fight for survival. So going into this movie, I was very excited because I loved Part 1. I thought it was great, and you could definitely tell it had some inspirations. It took some inspiration, notably from Scream, which is obviously one of my favorite horror movies, and I really enjoyed that one. The setup at the end of the first one was really great. So going into this one, I was excited, but I was a little worried when you go into sequels, especially right away, like not for me, not even a week after. And I liked this movie. I didn't like it as much as the first one, but I did not expect to. I do think it is a step down from it, but there are definitely things about this movie that I think improved compared to the first one. I think easily the best thing about this film are the kills. They are brutal. This does really feel like a 70s slasher film, something in the same vein as like Friday the 13th, a movie that I'm not too fond of. I know it's a classic, but I watched it for the first time back in October. I didn't really love it, but there are some classics from that time that I really like. And yes, I know that is from the 80s, just saying, but it definitely feels like a 70s slasher film. Obviously, there are a bunch of them, and this one really captures the camp feel, like they are at Camp Nightwing here, and I think the whole vibe of the movie and everything like that really worked. I also think that across the board, the performances were very good. I think the standout for me was Sadie Sink. Obviously, she plays Max in Stranger Things, a show that I would say is one of my favorites. And when I was explaining the plot of the first movie, I said it kind of feels like the people that haven't seen it, it kind of feels like Stranger Things, but bloodier and like more horror in a way. And again, not as good, because Stranger Things is amazing, but Sadie Sink really stands out here. I think she easily gave the best performance because she has emotion when she needs it. She has a lot of humor. Like, there are a lot of really funny lines in here. I don't think it's as funny as the first one because the first one had like the comedic relief character there, but there are a few instances of comedy, and for me they worked for the most part. And I also think that Emily Rudd was really good. She plays Sadie Sink's sister here, and something that I have to point out just because it's me and I'm a big David Bowie fan. Dog's name in this movie is Major Tom. Sadie Sink's character is Ziggy. It starts off with The Man Who Sold the World, but the Nirvana version, so you can count that as like a half point. But then later on in the film, it plays the David Bowie version of it, and they also play Moon Age Daydream, which I think is awesome. There's like 4 or 5 David Bowie things in this movie, and for me, he's my favorite solo artist of all time, and I made plenty of videos on it. I'll link them up here. So I think that was kind of special. I thought that was kind of cool. Honestly, all the acting performances across the board are very good. There aren't like a ton of standouts here. Everybody is good in the movie. There aren't like standouts for those who are bad, I'd say. But I think my biggest problem with the movie is that it does take a while to get going, and it tries to focus on building character, but for me, it didn't really land most of the time. Like, there was a lot of time here that was spent in that first act that it definitely did drag on, and for me, I was like, oh god, am I gonna have to give this a negative review? Like, am I not gonna like this? Considering I really loved the first one, I was like, damn, like, am I just not gonna like the sequel? And then that kind of set my worries for the third one. But I will say this one in ways, now let me elaborate on this, in ways feels like a filler between the first one and the third, because the first one took place in 1994, and then now we're jumping back to 1978, which they talked about in the first one, into Camp Nightwing, and then the third one we're going back to 1666 to more focus on the witch and everything. I'm not going to get too into it because obviously that goes into spoiler territory, but if you've seen the first one, you know what I'm talking about. And here it kind of felt like, okay, we need this gateway to explain what happened in this year just so we can go all the way back here. Like, we started here, these are our main characters in 1994, and now they have to hear this story of what happened in 1978, and then we go back into 1666. So again, that's not a spoiler, don't worry. I think that's obvious just with the titles. I kind of knew that was happening, but at times in that first act it really did drag, and I was like, this stuff is not landing for me. I really didn't find a lot of it compelling, and by the end they did kind of fix with the emotion more. I kind of felt a little bit more here, but I will say in that first act I was like, oh god, I can definitely see if people lose interest, because I was starting to. I didn't quite lose interest there. People are walking upstairs, I apologize. But I think that once it hits like halfway through the second act, and especially going into the third one, it does really pick up. When the killing in this movie starts, I think it gets a lot better. It really picks up its pace. It gets more interesting. You're more invested in it, or at least I was. Again, obviously it's a review, it's just my own opinion, but I was like, of course I'm going to watch the whole thing. But in that first act, I was like, okay, come on, can we actually get somewhere? Because the first one I thought was like perfectly paced. There was always something interesting happening between like the relationships and then the kills and all this, where in this one they do try to focus on some of the relationships between the characters, but it doesn't exactly click as well as the first one. But again, this movie is very good, and when the kills do start happening, it is awesome. They are brutal. I think there's probably more kills in this one than the first one, at least from memory, and they are gruesome. A lot of them are on camera, so if you're a fan of like those 70s, 80s, anything like the slasher genre, I feel like you'll dig this movie. I feel like some people will probably dig this movie more so than I did. I don't know, there was just something about it where they tried to focus so much on like the characters and the characterization to the point where it all actually fell flat. And I hope you get what I'm saying there, but I will say, because of the very good performances and the dialogue's hilarious here, the dialogue is very good. I think it might even be better than the first one. The acting isn't as good as the first one, but I think that's also just because I connected more with the characters from the first film compared to this one. And I know a lot of people will get mad at me for comparing the two films, but I mean, it's a trilogy, they're coming out weekly, it's kind of fresh in my mind, so I do have to. But Fear Street Part 2 1978 was a very brutal and entertaining film once the second act kicks in and once the kills do start happening. If they cut some stuff from that first act, it would have flowed a lot better and I would have been more interested, but again, by the end I was locked into the screen. I'm really excited for 1666. I think Part 3 will be the best of the trilogy, and I'm going to give Fear Street Part 2 1978 a 3 out of 5. But if you've seen the film by now, definitely let me know what you thought of it down below. I did, again, get to see this early, so I thank the people over at Netflix who sent this to me. It was a lot of fun. But I do recommend checking out this film if you've seen the first one, and if you did enjoy it, because I know a lot of people will enjoy this one a lot more than I did. And, of course, you know, it builds into the third one. Third one's going to be great. But thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Over and out.